Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bangunan Sulaiman for yet another KLRCA evening talk. This wraps up a very busy January. The title for this talk is Reflections on Construction Disputes in Mega Projects. The talk will be around an hour with 30 minutes of Q&A at the end for you to address the panel. And we have two giants of the field with us this evening. The talk will be delivered by Mr. Chow Fong and will be moderated by Datuk Professor Sundra Rajoo, who I believe does not need much introduction. He's the director of the KLRCA and the current president of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, CIARB. Without further ado, can we please put our hands together for Datuk Sundra?
Thank you, Franz. Welcome, Chow Fong, Mr. Chow Fong. Actually, we have a legend in our midst. You all must remember. I'll tell you all the anecdote that I have. When I first looked at the first local construction law book. At that time, it was Mr. Chow Fong's book, and it was the law relating to building contracts. And it was the only book that was available in our jurisdiction that was of some inkling of what building contracts were. So I think I have to introduce Mr. Chow. He's a very accomplished person. He's a chartered arbitrator, but I think we know him more as also as a corporate figure because he has built some real mega projects, get involved in it. Particularly, I think when you fly to Changi Airport, it is the handiwork of Mr. Chow. So, and then it doesn't stop there because he has done a lot of arbitrations, and in fact, I think as a person who was very involved in dispute resolution, is one of the prime movers of adjudication in Singapore. So can we please welcome Mr. Chow?
Can I just use the mic? Hey, thanks, Datuk. Thanks very much for that very, very generous introduction. It's always a pleasure to come up here. Usually around this time, I try to think of an excuse to come up here because. So thanks very much for the invitation. Now, tonight I thought I want to talk something other than law. Although there's a legal component in it, but I thought. With your indulgence, I could just stray a little bit into the other half of my life, which is, getting stuck with projects and trying to get myself out of projects. And then I hope to wolf a little bit into that, how as legal advisors and as construction lawyers and as construction arbitrators, we might view some of the legal developments arising in connection with projects of a particular sort of complexity. So, if you bear with me, this presentation is going to be a bit of my own personal indulgence. Yeah. So let me begin with a subscript which I call a German-Greek tragedy, right? And that sort of, I hope, sets a context for for what we're going to talk about. Yeah? Now, there's an airport that's being constructed in Berlin, right? This is the Berlin Brandenburg Airport. It is, it's an airport of some size. In Changi we have 3 terminal buildings, right? And the latest, of course, was Terminal 3 that was completed in 2009. And this airport in Berlin is of the same size as that. Now, we spent about 900 million Singapore dollars on that project, right? And this project, when it was conceived, had the same sense of ambition as we had. Berlin wanted to take away some of the business from Frankfurt as one of the leading sort of hub, air hub. And so when the Brandenburg Airport was conceived, the idea was that they will build this airport hub to serve a lot of these low-cost and budget carriers, right? And they signed up a couple of low-cost carriers, including EasyJet. Yeah. So he has a capacity of 27 million passengers, a year, and when it's completed, the projections were that it's going to be a third busiest airport in Germany. Right? Now, one of the problems in airports is the baggage handling. You determine how efficient the airport is in terms of how fast they could get the airport, the baggage, to you when you arrive, In Changi, we used at one time to have this so-called 20 minutes sort of rule. And the idea is that when you disembark from an airplane and you get to the curbside, it should not be more than 20 minutes. Otherwise, we have, statistically will fail that particular test. A lot of airports use that test, And so when this airport was conceived, naturally as engineers, German engineers are very detailed, extremely detailed and very, very, if you think in terms of top-notch sort of airport designers, a lot of them are Germans, right? And particularly in this area called baggage handling systems, they are one of the best in the world, right? So most modern airport planners, architects, engineers, the first thing they think of is the baggage handling system. They conceive a baggage handling system, then they design the whole project around that, Because the BHS is usually the one that's most difficult to contain in terms of its technical complexity, right? So they set up a very, very impressive sort of baggage handling system, and they test it very, very robustly, right? So it passed all the tests, what we call a dry test, 15,000 pieces of luggage, and it did very, very well, Now, unfortunately, they overlooked one particular aspect of the whole design, and they left it very much to be decided on the aesthetics moorings of an architect. The architect decided for aesthetic reasons, they want the fire control system to put out a fire by, throwing, the stuff out from the ground. So literally, the idea is to pump this air into the exhaust ducts running below the structure rather than from the top of the structure, right? And so the whole sort of natural behavior of hot air is reversed, right? So you imagine this is a system design against the law of physics. So you would require quite a lot of engineering to be able to sort of do that, right? Now, I suppose you could put past the Germans to do something like that. They're so good as engineers. Eventually, they'll conceive of a solution to this. But unfortunately, you couldn't think of a solution in time, right? So the whole thing has to sort of be revamped. And so something that appears very obvious, very simple in engineering, in fact, became the bugbear of the whole project. And this sort of tripped the whole planning process of the project, right? So for a very simple project, right, that was supposed to finish by 2010, right, work started in 2006, supposed to finish in 2010, they have revised the completion date several times, right? And officially today, it's declared to be 2016, end of this year, but the industry estimates that it's more likely to be 2018, if not 2017, The original budget at 2.5 billion euros, right? The cost today was 5.4 billion euros, and the final cost is now projected 8.6 billion euros. But this is the kind of thing that you get with mega projects. And the reason why I cite this German project example is this, right? I think the Germans are extreme engineers. They are really great engineers, right? And if somebody with a German psyche and a German penchant for detail and planning and design could make mistakes like that, or could encounter situations like that, a lot of us, ordinary mortals, will be even more susceptible. Right? The problem is that, of course, a lot of sort of project slips, can be disguised. If you say, look, a project is delayed, you can say, look, there are, of course, a lot of variations, and therefore this time is extended. But, the strange thing is, I was tasked to sort of look into into a program to help improve public sector construction procurement in Singapore. And of course, Singapore is not the only one doing it, right? In England, in Australia, they're all doing it. Yeah? And so I did quite. I mean, spending about 2 years sort of studying the problems of mega projects, right? And one of the truism which one of the questions which sort of raises itself is why do mega projects generate so many claims, right? And as arbitrators, as adjudicators, I'm sure a lot of you will encounter this. And the reason is very simple. The reason is because a successful construction project is actually the exception rather than the rule. Right? Now we assume that the construction industry has everything under its control, and they manage everything very well. But I mean, those of us who's been involved in the industry will know that more often than not, what we know is perhaps only at the start of the project is perhaps only a small proportion of the kind of moving parts that we're going to sort of grapple with, right? And this is borne out by a lot of studies, right? And so I think it caused me to take a more humble sort of approach to understanding project management. Now, I want to offer to you a couple of study results, right? One of these was a survey done by Pricewaterhouse, right? And this was a survey that was done for 33 projects. All these 33 projects are undertaken by listed companies in the United States. And these are companies in the United States who you cannot accuse to be short of project management expertise or engineering expertise, right? They have been experienced clients, and they've done a lot of these projects over and over again, right? And so they found out that, the finding is this: only 3 out of these 33 projects were successful in the sense that they were completed within time and within budget, right? So of course the accusation may be made, these are accountants, what do they know about projects and construction industry, right? No, so a subsequent study was undertaken by this body called the Construction Industry Institute. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with this name because this is one of the most highly respected research institutions in the US, and it's based in Texas, right, affiliated with the University of Texas. And they did a much, much larger study. A study involving 975 projects in the United States. And they found that of these 975 projects, if you read the findings, it's quite startling, Only 5.4% of the projects met what they call best of class predictability in terms of cost and time schedule. And what is this best of class predictability? That means the final cost and final time taken for the project doesn't deviate by more than 5%. Right? Which is startling. I mean, that means out of 975 projects, less than 50 projects actually delivered on time and on budget. Yeah. Now, then again, as I dig more, I find there are a lot more interesting, results. Oxford University, there's a business school called the Side Business School, right? And this problem, sort of befuddled a lot of these guys until they decided to start a program just on mega projects, right? And there's a researcher called Brent Freiberg who's done a tremendous amount of work in this area, covering all sectors of infrastructure development, right? Roads, links, energy, rail, and so on and so forth, right? And if you look at this chart, you see that, for example, in roads projects, right, frequency of cost overrun, 9 out of 10. Yeah, the cost overrun may be 20%, but it happens 9 out of 10 times. Yeah, links, energy, rail. So every sector, right, there are serious slips in terms of performances, right? And again, it probably is not the fault of any particular engineer or particular client, right? It's the way mega projects are, and because mega projects are not understood, or we do not have the capacity yet to marshal and control all the moving parts in the big project, that this this is the situation that we get, right? So, Ben Flyberg, right? I got this from his lecture. He has this called the iron law, the law of mega projects. Over time, over budget, over and over again. Yeah. No, so what happened? Why do we have these problems, right? And I think, as I said, I think a lot of you who have dealt with construction projects, you'll be aware of what the construction projects, and what are problems facing construction projects, right? I mean, there's high degree of customization, so you can't predict completely at the start what are the essentials, or what are all the things that are going to go in the project, right? And as you'll see later, it is even very difficult to sometimes describe the essentials clearly. Yeah? Fragmentation, different parts of the building or the roads or equipment are being done by different people, and often from different countries, right? Delivery period, long period of delivery. A lot of things could happen during that long gestation period and delivery period, right? Now, on top of that, there are the risks of new technology, as we see in the Brandenburg Airport, case study. Yeah. So, the other interesting which I found was that a lot of these problems lie with front-end tasks, starting projects on the wrong foot, right? The Pricewaterhouse again did this study. Now, the reason why Pricewaterhouse did this study is because, it was a real problem in the U.S. in 2012, 2013, when Obama wanted to actually launch a $1 trillion, public works program, and so Pricewaterhouse, conducted a study in anticipation of that spending, program. So they did this study to just ask, why did all these projects, end up with, so much trouble, right? Poorly defined estimates, that was one of the problems that was cited. Lack of executive sponsorship, that means leadership, the problem with project leadership, right? Poorly defined objectives, and so these were all sort of canvassed out, right? And so when last year, I got together different, batches of project directors and supervisors in the civil service in Singapore, right? And I did a same survey, the same PwC survey, and I asked them, look, first of all, if you could sort of define project success in the end as delivery of a project with, within the 5% sort of deviation, sort of, benchmark that we set, and consider those projects where this delivery, these results were not delivered, right? What are the problems, right? And so I asked them, and this is the response that they gave me. I got a fairly large sample, of 79 people, yeah, and what's striking is that without telling them what the U.S. experience was, they came back with the same kind, roughly the same kind of problems, right? There was some change in terms of the order, but the four most important problems were these, right? Poor estimates of cost and timeline, lack of execution, sponsorship, poorly defined project objectives, and of course changes, in scope midway in the project. Right? Critically, a lot of these are project management issues, right? Now, and I think, as you shall see, then, I hope to invite your thoughts later on. What can a construction lawyer do to actually sort of alleviate that? Yeah, especially some of you who have sort of straddled both sides of the industry in your career. It would be interesting to get your thoughts on this. Yeah. Now, but just bear that in mind, and then we'll come back to these issues towards the end of this short presentation. But what I want to sort of cover now are just some issues that perhaps have been sort of brewing for some time, and I'm sure you know, in the course of your work, you have encountered some of this, right? Now, what I think the striking thing about some of these developments, they make it a lot more difficult, I think, for those of us who are involved in advisory capacities, to pin down with certainty some of the legal positions relating to very important issues in construction claims in big projects. Yeah. And I want to just raise a couple of them for your consideration this evening. Right? There are three cases I'd like to sort of just invite post for your consideration, and they relate to these three subjects: right? Condition precedent, dispute adjudication board, and performance bonds. Right? Of course, condition precedent is one of the very often encountered issues, I think, in a lot of arbitration work. You know, most tribunals struggle with this, problem. A contractor is denied essentially his entire claims because a particular condition was not satisfied. Typically a condition to serve notice within a stipulated period of time. Yeah. And the struggles there is, of course, between fairness and yet at the same time, having to give effect to the strict construction of, conditions precedent. And so there has been a lot of interest, I think, in the literature over this particular point. How strict should conditions precedent be construed, right? And I want to suggest that the debate is still going on. It's not been settled. But I want to direct your attention to a couple of cases. Of course, the debate started with this decision called the K-Mark. I think most of you will be familiar with this. This is an Australian decision. And of course, when it was first delivered, there was a lot of outcry, in many parts of the construction fraternity, right? Basically, this was a contract that was delayed by 77 working days. And it was not in dispute that the delays were due to the Owners Act of Prevention, right? The contractor applied for EOT, but this was resisted on the ground that the contractor failed to comply with the notification requirement, right? Now, the Australian Northern Territory Supreme Court held that the terms of the contract do not afford the consultant any discretion to allow an EOT, right? So if the contractor fails to comply with the EOT, the notification requirements under the EOT clause, what it means is that the consultant has no power under the Act to grant an EOT, even if he's convinced himself that the situation is one where EOT is justified. Now, and the result is of this construction or this interpretation of the EOT clause is that the EOT machinery effectively breaks down whenever a contractor fails to issue a notification, the required notice, right? So because of that, it follows. Therefore, time was set at large, and with the other consequences that follow that, right? The LAD clause cannot be enforced, right? But I think it's quite apparent immediately to a lot of people who find it very difficult to accept this, that accept the finding that here is a contractor who did not comply with the requirement when he ought to, and because of his non-compliance, he managed to sustain an argument that the whole EOT machinery breaks down, and therefore he's not liable for legal damages. Yeah. So that's K-Mark, right? And I said K-Mark was criticized, was commented on. The bulk of the writers in England, of course, found K-Mark to be very, very objectionable, and when several sort of English decisions immediately following that, took issue with this particular issue. But I want to just raise two writers whose sympathies actually lie with K-Mark, right? One was Picker Vance, And he wrote in 2011, and he made this observation that all the English cases which criticizes GEMA, they were essentially arbiter, right? The comments made were arbiter because this point was not, crucial to the decision, right? So his observation was that GEMA remains the only case expressly dealing with this particular notice stroke prevention principle, right? And Vivian Ramsey, and Stephen First in their 9th edition of Keatings suggest that the GEMA sort of ruling isn't that as far off the mark as one might think, at the first instance, right? Because it is quite consonant with the prevention principle as we understand it, right? Now, then I think a very decisive position was taken in Obrascon, right? Obrascon Party, in relation to an airport project in Gibraltar. Now, this was in relation to the extension of time clause in the FIDIC contract, right? Now, clause 20.1 of the FIDIC conditions provide for the, for the general kind of, formula where you serve a notice and then, before a contractor can be granted extension of time, right? Now, Justice Aikenhead held that clause 20.1 of the FIDIC contract was indeed a condition precedent and operates as a condition precedent. But he allowed this sort of wiggle room when he suggested that a clause such as clause 20.1 should be construed broadly, right? Because it has this very serious effect on what could otherwise be good claims of a contractor, right? And of course, what was very clear is that, what was occupying his mind, obviously, in that case was that he observed some, in another part of his judgment that the effect of the condition in that case would have been to extinguish the contractor's claims completely, yeah. And I think the general observation, therefore, is this, that if we are drafting a contract and to avoid the kind of GEMA extremities, then obviously the better approach would be to, provide that in the absence of such notice, the certifier may grant EOT, right? All certified lawsuits, just on the materials before the certifier, which means that the disadvantage that the contractor will have is that he has no opportunity then to advance his case or make his arguments, right? But the certifier would be perfectly entitled to just make the decision on the basis of materials that are before him, right? So which means that the suggestion or the submission that the EOT machinery is broken down could not therefore be advanced, right? Because there's still EOT, there's still consideration of the fact that there was act of prevention, and the EOT sort of decision ultimately would have been made on some analysis of that particular issue. So I think that's one bugbear that I think a lot of us had to struggle with. How broadly do we construe condition precedent provisions in the construction contract? Yeah. Now, of course, the other matter is the dispute education board, and you must have been aware of this long history or long chronology of events that we have in Singapore over the Pesero case, right? Now, it went to the Court of Appeal twice, and the latest is that it's going to go to the Court of Appeal again, right? Now, I think we're having a lot of fun with DAB decisions in Singapore, because no less than 10 Singapore judges, different judges have sat on this case, right? So practically the whole of judiciary is very familiar with the facts of this case. Now the facts are quite complicated, somewhat complicated, but reduced to its essence, it essentially comes down to this: to what extent can you enforce a DAB decision without reviewing the merits of the case, right? Now, the contract to which the decision relates was a pipeline project in West Java, and the DAB in that case awarded a sum of $17 million, right? And the the contractor brought it before the arbitral tribunal. The majority of the arbitral tribunal decided that the contractor has to pay the amount that the DAB decided, right? So that was what the arbitral tribunal decided. They took a look at the DAB decision and they said, look, Mr. Contractor, you have to pay this $17.3 million, right? Now, the contractor in that case, the employer in that case went successfully to challenge this arbitral this decision of the arbitral tribunal before the High Court, right? Challenging that this was not a proper final award, right? And the basis on which the challenge was made was that the parties were not given opportunity for the merits to be rehearsed and reconsidered by the arbitral tribunal before the award was made. So, and the High Court agreed, and the Court of Appeal upheld the High Court decision, right? Now, that was in 2011, yeah? Now, but what the Court of Appeal said in that 2011 judgment was that the contractor could apply for the enforcement of the DAB decision by way of an interim or partial award, right? And then just leave the merits to be analyzed, debated, and eventually adjudicated upon when the final award is made. Yeah. So those were the terms on which the 2011 Court of Appeal judgment was delivered. So the contractor took the Court of Appeal's judgment to heart and did as well what would appear to be exactly what the Court of Appeal said, right? So they tried again, and they tried again in 2013 by submitting the DAB, the same DAB decision for and applied for interim award to be awarded by the arbitral tribunal, right? Now, the employer again resisted before the High Court because on this ground, the construction is that the interim award is a provisional award and therefore contradicts Section 19B of our International Arbitration Act, right? Because our International Arbitration Act does not allow for provisional awards. And more equally important, Section 19B of our International Arbitration Act does not allow an award to be varied. Now, the High Court, in fact, the High Court decision there was quite a very masterful judgment. It was delivered by Justice Vinod Kumarasamy, I mean, a very accomplished jurist. Now, he read our IAA, and then he decided that the IAA does not prohibit awards for relief for a limited period, and that the kind of award that was before him should be actually treated as a final award for the purpose of that of the Act. So, because the interim award, although expressed as interim, was final and determinative of the issues that he was asked to determine, namely that the contractor had to pay this sum of $17.5 million, right? So, insofar as this obligation of the contractor to pay this amount at that point in time, it is final and it's determinative. So there's no reason why it could not be treated as final for the purpose of the International Arbitration Act. Now, when before the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal generally accepted, what Justice Kumarasamy said, but it went into analysis of the terms partial and interim, right? And decided that partial and interim, these both terms are used interchangeably, but the term provisional award, right, does not, it's a different sort of animal altogether, right? In his judgment, the majority of the Court of Appeal held in 2015 that a provisional award does not definitively dispose of the preliminary or substantive issues before the court. I mean, before the tribunal, right? Whereas a partial or interim award, does so. In this case, an interim or partial award determines that the contract should be paid is $17 million, right? And that's the only issue that the interim award was required to determine. Yeah? So, now, interestingly, this decision last year by the Court of Appeal was one of those instances where a Court of Appeal had a dissenting judgment. Right? And the dissenting judgment was okay, the quorum of the Court of Appeal consists of our current CJ and Justice Quentin Low. Both of them are very formidable construction lawyers in their own right. And the dissenting judgment was delivered by our ex-Chief Justice, our previous Chief Justice, who sits on this court as a senior judge. We have this system whereby some of the illustrious sort of judiciary members, when they are allowed to retire, they are invited back to to court as senior judges. So he was sitting on the Court of Appeal as a senior judge, and he delivered a dissenting judgment. In his dissenting judgment, he said, look, he basically disagreed with the construction placed by the majority on account of he went along basically with the submission, with the analysis of the 2011 Court of Appeal judgment. Yeah. So, we have a situation where the two Court of Appeal judgments were clearly not reconcilable, and so the 2015, this last year, the Court of Appeal was in one of those rare instances where the Court of Appeal reversed its previous judgment. Right? But that was the judgment of the Court of Appeal 3 years ago. So now the interesting thing was somebody did a tally, right? The first the first Court of Appeal case, right, all the way leading up to the first Court of Appeal case, there was first of all the High Court judge, and the three judges on the Court of Appeal were all unanimous in that case. So you have 4 judges deciding for the construction that was placed by the employer. The second Court of Appeal case, you have 1 High Court judge that decides for the contractor, 2 out of 3 deciding for the contractor, 1 dissenting judge. If you add the total number of judges who took the opposing view, is 5:3. So so point was made as to how whether this issue is finally settled. But watch this space. I think we are in for a third round of battle. I think sometime this year or next year. Yeah. Now, the other area of development I want to sort of raise is our continuing involvement or evolution of our law on performance bonds in Singapore. Now, you remember Singapore, we have this very unusual doctrine of unconscionability, right? That a call, a performance bond can be restrained, not only just on the ground of fraud, but on the ground that the call was made unconscionably. It means you either sort of call for the full amount when, on a realistic assessment of, the exposure, it comes nowhere near the amount of, that was called on the bond, right? So now this doctrine of unconscionability is settled law. It has been around since Bokotra in the decision Bokotra in the mid-1990s. So it's about 20 years old, right? The interesting slant that this latest case, CKR Contract Services and Explinium Land, takes is this: the performance bond there, was any kind of performance bond, right? So obviously, on the construction of the bond itself, it can be restrained on the ground of fraud or unconscionability. But the bond was furnished pursuant to the terms of the contract. And there's a clause in this particular, the underlying contract, which provides specifically that the contractor is not to call a bond, not to restrain, not to apply for restraint on the call of a bond on the grounds of unconscionability. So the situation is this: you have the performance bond, which obviously will be subject to the law of, the principle of unconscionability, and then at the same time you have the underlying contract, which says, look, you can provide this bond, right? And we're not disputing that this doctrine of unconscionability is around, but you have a contractual obligation not to call, the bond on this ground, not to challenge the call of the bond on this ground, right? So obviously the question then is whether such a provision, the term in the contract, should be void on grounds of public policy, whether it is, it should be, the court should just ignore this and just, grant the restraint on the principles that we have hitherto been used to in determining whether restraint should be granted. Now, the High Court decided that it was against public policy to give effect to this particular term in the contract, right? But the Court of Appeal decided that the two things are separate, right? Because you're talking about two different instruments. Now, if you look in terms of the bond itself, it is still governed by the law of unconscionability, the principle of unconscionability, and that a call could not be made on grounds of fraud. I mean, if frauds could be, evidence of frauds could be adduced. But the contractor here has a separate contractual undertaking, and that contractual undertaking is undertaking not to call the bond, not to resist a call on the bond on the ground of unconscionability. And so that term in this underlying contract was enforced by the court. Yeah. So it's an interesting slant, because what it means is that employers could then get around our doctrine of unconscionability through the principal contract or the underlying contract. Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the recent legal developments that that you may want come from that some of us have been grappling with down south of here. But on top of that is this overlay of these current difficulties in the construction industry, and there are a lot of other problems that I think as construction lawyers, our fraternity in Singapore would be called upon to address. We have a very high spate of construction failures, right? Failures of delivery, construction delivery. There are a lot of contractors who went to liquidation over the last 2-3 years. Many of them rather unexpected. I'll just share some of these things that are making the news, in the circle down below, right? One of the problems that, of course, project managers and owners have is this: when a contractor is slowing down, when a contractor is, grappling with problems, obviously the best approach is to try to see whether you could assist the contractor to get over the hill, get over the hump. And sometimes when they get over the hump, then it's fine. They will be the delivery will then sort of continue, and that usually is a better result than sort of terminating it and then getting another guy to come in, right? Because the cost of getting a replacement contractor usually will outweigh whatever amounts that are left in the contract. Right? Now, but then there's on the other side of the coin this very compelling pressure as well, that if a contractor really has no chance of recovering, the contractor, the employer is really taking a very, very huge gamble, right? particularly for public sector projects, you know, and especially where the minister has promised a particular delivery date. You know. That's often very, very tricky. Many heads, very noble heads have been chopped, and but let me just bring you through a couple of incidents recently. Yeah? Now, this is the early incident, but I just want to sort of illustrate, you know, one of the problems that we had about this difficulty of making this call, this decision. When do you actually cut the contractor off? Yeah. Now, this was a case. I don't know whether you remember this issue of the Y2K syndrome. You know, I mean, there was this, you know, this sort of prophecy that, you know, on 1st of January 2000, you know, the whole world will come to an end because all the computer systems will collapse unless, you know, you grapple with this, yeah? Y2K problem, and to get this guy to come fix up your systems and so on. So our National Skin Center is a specialist sort of center within the Singapore General Hospital. They engaged this firm in 1998 to fix the Y2K problem, right? You know, so, you know, the Y2K problem, one will hope that will be fixed by sometime around the complete system, by at least August, if not September 1999, right? But this guy didn't finish after 31st of December 1999. In fact, he only delivered some sample of package in February 2000. So, I mean, it was a bit embarrassing, yeah. I only raised it because it was embarrassing for, you know, for the civil servants who was involved in the project. You know, eventually he was still, you know, has the audacity to claim for, you know, for payment, right? And of course, his claim was dismissed, but the issue then remains, and this is a subject of a lot of, you know, discussions in Singapore. Should this contractor's contract be terminated earlier, right? One would have thought that if you are going to deliver Y2K, you know, Y2K kind of program, and, you know, I mean, it's you know, the whole thing should have been delivered, say, by August, October, or, you know. Now, so that's one case. Now, the second case was this case of Alpine. I don't know whether Alpine Bow, this very, very big Austrian contractor, has any projects in KL? Does he have? Now, Alpine Bow had a lot of MRT contracts, right? I think it had these 4 packages. The first 2 which they completed, I mean, some years back before this incident were delivered on time, right? But sometime in 2014, the whole, you know, parent company collapsed, right? And you know, the chronology of events is something like this. These are 2 very big contracts, right? Now, they were awarded in 2009, and you know, this is reported in tunnel, you know, link engineering. And LTA colleagues refuse to give me any details on this. So I take this out from the technical press. So 405 million euros for what we call a down line, right? 2 packages. And they ordered this very, very sophisticated tunnel boring machine in 2010. Yeah. I think mid-June 2013, right? Just days before Alpine's collapse, before the company collapsed, the company was still assuring the LTA that the project will be done on time. Yeah. So obviously, if you're a project manager at LTA, I mean, one has to sympathize with him because, you know, in the face of this assurance, in the face of the fact this contractor has never given any problems in the past, right? How does one call, you know, make the call to terminate the contract? Yeah. No, and then we had more, you know, last year another very high-profile contractor, Hexacon. So it's not Hexacon, it's called Hexa Group. I beg your pardon. And this was a roads contract, you know, fairly. No, it's not a very big contract, but it's a very prominent road, you know, which, you know. So and I think for public sector officers that's troubling. You don't mind a big contract that's hidden away, nobody knows. But this may not be a very big contract, but it's very visible. You know? So you can't run away. Now, a couple of us sort of gathered together and sort of decided, this is an ongoing thing, right? How do we, anticipate and perhaps, plan towards, to help project managers make a proper call for these things. I mean, we're not sort of completed this part of our inquiry yet, but some tentative sort of, points have been raised by a lot of people. Yeah. I think if you've run a project, you know that if your subcontract, you hear of a contractor coming to ask for early payment, that suggests that he's obviously not financially very well. Yeah. And then when the subcontractors begin to request for direct payments, again, that's another issue. Yeah. Now, of course, the interesting thing now is we have the SOP Act, right? And if you have the situation with the SOP, where a lot of subcontractors are taking out applications against this particular main contractor for payments, then obviously, I mean that is an even more clearer, even clearer sort of confirmation of the problems that the main contractor is in. Now, the other one is of course repeated inability, the inability to meet deadlines, when revision A, then revision B are programs, end up with revision Z plus 1, those will be very, very troubling indicators. Yeah. Now the other issue that I think we sometimes don't notice, we don't sort of track, major staff changes, right? Anyway, the staff keep on changing, especially project directors. If there are 3 changes of project directors over the last 2 months, there are clearly some issues because nobody wants to be around to get a head chopped. I think with the and then of course when the contractors start taking a more litigious attitude, where usually he writes in colloquial Singaporean English, and all of a sudden he comes with perfectly grammatized sort of letters. Now, I hate to sort of draw up another German example, but the fact is, the fact is, I think the Germans are so good in, technically, because they are quite honest in sort of facing up to their, project problems. And I must say, that's one element which I think Singapore, we still have not marshaled enough confidence in our ability to do so yet. So if there's a public project with a lot of problems, the stamp secret will automatically be on all the files. Nobody can sort of open it up. But our Prime Minister actually sort of delivered a speech on National Day and highlighted one project failure, right? Which actually, as a result of which, a lot of these concerns were raised, and I think, you see, I think we have very good engineers in Singapore. I mean, I'm very proud of a lot of project managers in Singapore. But the problem is that I think the mega project issues is not something that even with the best engineering expertise you can control all the problems and the variables. Right? So I think we can only resolve this when we are more open and prepared to sort of look at these issues objectively. And I think the kudos to the Germans and many countries in the West is that I think they're more prepared to open up this kind of problems than we are in Asia. I think in Asia we tend to sort of try to cover it up as much as possible. I mean, I was talking to Datuk just now. It's particularly true among with say Korean contractors. A lot of Korean contractors, they will raise claims, but a lot of them settle, and the reason is because they don't want a lot of these things to get into the public, right? But in the West, I think you get a lot of these things articulated more openly. So now the Albay Philharmonic was one of the landmarks in Hamburg. Right? It's a very exciting project because it's a Philharmonic hall that's constructed on an existing industrial building. Right? So in that sense, it's pretty iconic, And I think any city would be very proud to have something like that. It's a very, very exciting sort of project. Now, the work started in 2007, and it was supposed to be complete by 2010, right? Now, in December, but as recently as in December 2014, they could only look towards completion by October 2016, right? And the current schedule is for opening January 2017, right? So actual construction took 3 times as long as planned. At conception, the cost of the hall was estimated at 77 million euros. In 2007, we went to 241 million euros. Then 2008, 450 million euros, and 2015, 789 million euros. Right? So final construction cost was 10 times the cost of the, So this is a problem of staggering proportions, right? It may not be the biggest project that's done in Germany, but the magnitude of the departure from the targets are quite astounding. Yeah. Now, I raised this, but I've not done analysis as to what actually led to this. I'm still in the process of getting data on this, but these are issues that we're going to see increasingly a lot more. And someone interviewed the mayor of Hamburg, and he suggested one of the problems. Of course, this has to be sort of verified more in more detail. And he suggested one of the problems is that in a lot of public sector contracts or projects, I don't know whether this same situation is encountered here, but apparently in a lot of countries, in large parts of the West, when you want to get your project proposal through, you do not want to show too high an estimate or that the project will take too long, right? And because of that, all these things are shaved down to very, very fine margins, right? So that's one of the issues that was one of the possible reasons that was cited by the mayor. But of course, then one is to ask, how does that explain 77? All that evolution from 77 million euros to 789 million euros. Huh? I mean, that's quite astounding. But I think looking at it, it's still a fantastic project, and it looks a very exciting project. Yeah? The question then, of course, is whether if someone knew that the project's true cost a bit more accurately, whether they would have implemented a more robust sort of project management system and approach to this project. Yeah. Now, remember I was making this point that the issue that this problem is not limited to any particular country, right? In the United Kingdom, there was this very, very large concern, this huge spate of public sector projects that were in trouble, right? And so they invited the Royal Academy of Engineering. I think those of you who are engineers, you might be familiar with this body, the Royal Academy of Engineering, because these are supposed to be a group of engineers that have achieved such eminent status, right? Well, I was talking to Sir Vivian Ramsey. He claims that if you are elected to be a fellow of this Royal Academy, it's considered equivalent of getting a Nobel Prize in engineering. So this is how august this body is. But the UK government commissioned the Royal Academy of Engineering to do this report on public sector projects and procurement, right, in 2014. Yeah, and they raised this particular issue that with a lot of public sector projects in the United Kingdom, this issue of realistic targets for a project. Right? Targets in terms of cost, in terms of time, in terms of the performance of the project when it's completed, right? And they suggest that a lot of contracts, we're not incentivizing the people to deliver the right behavior, right? I mean, there are a lot of interesting recommendations there. I mean, we can discuss it. I think if we have time at some future occasion. But there were remarking one instance. We are incentivizing the wrong people to do the wrong things. Now, I guess the message I have to deliver this evening is quite a simple thing, right? There are a lot of issues that are beyond construction lawyers, right? And I think as construction lawyers, I think we should be humble to recognize that. We should not try to suggest to whoever the party that employs us that we could rescue a project from the effects of bad planning and bad execution. Right? But to some extent, I think construction lawyers has a role to play, one of which is the procurement model. Now, if you are engaged upfront for a mega project, and increasingly we see a lot of construction lawyers in Singapore being engaged for that role, right? then they should think about the issues that are likely to have, to be encountered in the project. Consider very carefully the procurement model, right? Because the procurement model is a space where you allocate risks, right? Where you allocate, specific tasks and events, right? And I think that has to be considered very carefully, right? Now we have various models, and sometimes depending on what are the more urgent sort of issues, you want to prefer one model, against the other, right? Now, traditionally, of course, we like to take the build-only kind of model. That means we design and then we build, But in Singapore, of course, there is increasing preference for design and build contracts. Not because of cost savings, but more because of time savings. That when we were constructing the Marina Bay Sands project, the 3 towers, the boats on top, right? The overriding sort of pressure on the developer was time, and they did it on what's called a management contracting model. I think you use it here in this country. It obviously is a model where it's very difficult to put a cap on cost, but then of course, it gives the owner a lot more control over the whole project management process, right? So the pressure there was because the government, as one of the terms for allocating land for that project, has a very, very high degree of damages clause if the developer failed to develop project by the appointed time. Yeah. So they took that decision. Anyway, they're very familiar with that model, and they sort of were able to run with that. It resulted in a lot of disputes, a lot of adjudications. But again, this is where their legal team, I think did a marvelous job. They were able to sort of get a lot of the disputes settled, some halfway through adjudication, some halfway through arbitration, but eventually everything was settled. And the owners expressed a lot of satisfaction with the final results. Yeah. Now, the other part that I think lawyers should encourage both their clients, whether they're employer or contractors, to do is early risk identification. I mean, for a contractor, sometimes if you sell it in this way, they say, look, I'm helping you to identify areas that you could claim. Then they'll be very happy about that. But really, it boils down on early risk, of what could really go wrong. And this is increasingly now required of contractors or leading contractors and subcontractors to ask them to do a risk probability analysis of what are the events that are likely to go wrong. I think I think a good set of contract procurement model now should have this phase where where one enters into this phase of risk analysis. And of course, documentation management. Right? I think that most of you who are involved in arbitration, you know, it is a very, very tedious and very thankless task. Yeah, but it's a task nevertheless. It's very crucial, I think, for the success of the outcome of any dispute. So I think these are the kind of things that lawyers could do during the project, right? You could try to get clients and your counterparts to look into these 3 areas. Right? But what you cannot do is you can pretend to retrieve a project from poor conception and execution. Okay. Okay. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy if you could just tell me where, share with me how you think I could take some of these inquiries further.
Thank you, Mr. Chow. It's a very interesting perspective. Thank God we are not alone. I must say, because the amount of mega projects that we have in Malaysia, and every week I think we have an announcement. I was waiting for the budget to cut back on all the mega projects. None of it was cut back. Did you all realize that? So I think we are on a mega project spree. But one of the interesting things I realize is that there are a number of players involved, and the contractors within the contracting field. There are also a number of players. So you have the main contractor, the subcontractors, then different kind of expertise that comes along, and then there seems a suggestion that somebody will start off with a plan. They want this project. And as you suggested, that they will actually mislead Because if they told the truth, there's going to be a large sum of money, nobody will start on it, I suppose, or they will rethink it. I think that has been very, very useful. Condition precedence, I think we have always struggled with it. In arbitration, I face almost every arbitration, there seems to be now a situation where the contract itself has many condition precedents, and which you have to deal with it. And sometimes there are situations where factually you will see that the contractor is entitled to extension of time because he's been delayed. It's not his fault, you know. Then this legal argument is brought forward, and I suppose as lawyers we tend to actually accept the legal argument and not go against that, because then it gives uncertainty. With that, I would like to actually ask you all, to throw the floor open for questions. Would you all like to ask Mr. Chow any questions that you have? Yes, Kamraj.
I don't know if this is actually...
Would you say your name and then ask the question?
Kamraj Nigam. I don't know if this is really a question as much as sharing an anecdote about a German engineer who, not far from here, I think at the Hilton, turned to me and said, you know, Mr. Nigam, you spent a long time and a lot of effort drafting this contract for us. You do realize one thing. If everything goes well, we are putting this contract into the bottom drawer and never looking at it again. And I think that really, to me, sums it up from a different point of view, that no matter how good a job you do drafting a contract as a construction lawyer, it's not going to do the parties any good if they don't administer it properly. And the reality is that when a well-administered project, it seems to me from my limited experience, often involves situations where nobody reads the contract. They know what the right people know what they're supposed to do, know what the right thing to do is, and they get on with doing it. And generally, often, it seems to me that in the few successful projects I've heard of, they don't seem to have paid much attention to the contract at all.
Thanks, Kamraj, for that. You know, I think basically, you know, in my own sort of experience and sort of incidents I've encountered, I think a project success depends on whether you have a good patron saint, you know, what they call, you know, the project leadership, yeah. Someone must be so passionate to really sort of drive the project. And if you have a situation where, if one has a situation where the project is administered just, you know, as part of a set of routine tasks, then that's fine. The project is fairly, you know, simple and straightforward. For example, if you've been building schools all this time, then of course, you know, another school is just another routine sort of project. But you take say the example of this project here, right? To build this this KLRCA, you know, premises here. I mean, it's your passion to drive it, right? That makes a difference, right? Because otherwise you would not have been able to get a consultant in line, isn't it? Huh?
I don't think so. You want to go through this again. I think all sides. I don't think so. Anyone.
No, but at the top you need someone who has this passion to drive the project, right? And you know, what's interesting is that this was a point that was raised by the PwC study that you know, you take an airport project, you actually need a guy who's fairly sort of, you know, in Singapore, you know, we are very used to autocratic systems of, you know, running things. But this where I think an autocratic system actually does, you know, has its positive sort of, you know, stance, you know, because you do need someone who says, look, everything ultimately at the end of the day, the buck stops with me, and I'm going to drive this project, right? I'm going to put my, my signature on the project, and I think that's the problem with a lot of mega projects is that accountability is diffused, and when it's diffused, nobody actually sort of owns it. Then the various parts could not, finds it a lot difficult to come together, you know.
I think one of the things that I realized when doing some projects or looking even at arbitration, sometimes it's the issue of competence. Sometimes skill sets are not actually meeting. Let's say it's a mega project, you require certain kinds of skill set. Perhaps the architect who is supposed to actually do a major part of the design and all that, he should have done some mega projects before. Maybe if he has not done such kinds of project, then you may have a problem of he learning on the job, and that itself may cause problem. The other thing that I think in many, particularly developing and emerging economies, we have a problem, a leakage issue. You know, we have to deal with that also, because sometimes innate in many of the projects are things that you don't see, which is not in the contract. So there's an arrangement, perhaps people do things in different ways, and that sometimes does lead to actually projects not succeeding the way it's supposed to be, because people don't do what they're supposed to do, or they pull back when they're supposed to do certain things. I mean, I say it quite openly, you know, because I think it's about time we need to speak about such things.
This is a question for Mr. Chow. Following on your theme on indulgence for tonight, if you may indulge us, the condition precedent, you know, we're all quite comfortable with the fact that in the prevention principle is for the benefit of the employer, you know, is to keep time not at large. But if the condition precedent is applied to a contractor's claim for costs, would the court indulge in allowing it?
Okay, I think to sort of address the point that you raised, which I have, I have to be careful about, you know, what hat I'm putting on. You're putting on the head of course, an advisor who is advising someone in the midst of a dispute. Then obviously, you want to say that you should read the condition precedent strictly, right? But if you are thinking in terms as a strategist, right? I think there is this reservoir in many arbitral tribunals and courts that if you appeal to their sense of fairness, especially when a condition precedent is drafted very, very harshly, right? You will still get some wiggle room. I have said in a couple of arbitrations where this issue was actually raised, and I can sense from my fellow, you know, arbitrators, deliberations, they are very uncomfortable where the effect of a condition precedent is that it rules out this contractor's entitlement, rightly or wrongly, completely, right? But where it's seen that he will still get something, you know, then they're probably likely to give effect to the, condition, the particular term. And that's the reason why when I was discussing, with a couple of construction lawyers in Singapore recently, I mean, the consensus seems to be this, that you know, if the term is drafted in a very, very harsh manner, it's going to be construed strictly against the party that drafts it, you know. Incidentally, I should announce that we are launching Singapore construction, Singapore Journal of Construction Law very soon. We are in the process of doing so. And at some point in time, we're very happy to invite, you know, views from across the causeway here, you know, for a journal, because we're sort of doing it for the first time. But there's quite a bit of enthusiasm for that, for this publication.
Yeah. They're always having good ideas, isn't it? So, yes.
Hello, good evening. My name is Isaac Chow. I just want to find out whether, your opinion, whether over the years the professionals in the industry, is it because of their lack of respect in the industry now from the contractors or from the yesteryear that is causing all these additional claims and stuff of thing? Because a lot of time in the yesteryears, when an architect says something and the contractor has a lot of respect for the consultant, and he takes his word and then he's quite happy with it. But today, I think a lot of contractors are not. They're actually challenging the consultants. That's one. The other thing is the procurement method. We used to rely on traditional sort of standard forms, which has been tested over time. So everybody knows their role. Today, you have bespoke contracts coming into place, which is very new, haven't been tested, and a lot of things are not fair. Sometimes it's too biased to the client, and these are all actually causing problems. And like you said, in Singapore, they are doing away with the traditional style and going to turnkey. And this is where the problem starts, where the contractor plays the main role, and he engages the consultant. So that's one area of it. The other one is the client. Client management is also important, I feel. A lot of clients cannot visualize the end product from the beginning. And as the construction moves, he changes his mind. I want this, I want that. You know, but if he can visualize it initially, like for example using BIM now, then probably these problems will be lesser. Thank you.
Interesting that you mentioned BIM. Is this being used extensively here in this country? Do you know? Huh?
Yes, nowadays it's a new trend, but for bigger projects, because it's now not that costly, and there are more players using it. But it's not as extensive as in the UK and all that. The UK, I think, is leading this area.
In Singapore, of course, with the top-down approach, our EPCA ordains that all contractors should, projects be beyond the size of 20 million or something, should go on BIM, and so that is a command sort of, but of course it's interesting to see how the results, because we are not. I think the results are still mixed, right? Because of course there are some contractors who know how to use it well, and I think they reported very satisfactory results. But there are some contractors who sort of use it just as a kind of a scope, as a checklist, that or a bucket list, that okay, I've done BIM, and then you can check against the box, There's one contractor who even proudly told me, "Oh, I only do my BIM at the end of my project, just to satisfy BC I've done." But the logic is understandable. I think the rationale or the BIM. I think as it gets more, used more extensively, then of course the cost will probably be lower. I mean, more people are familiar with the project. But whether we did the right thing by forcing everybody to do it, that I'm not sure in Singapore. But obviously it's a good thing. I mean, where it's been used well, I think the results have been quite impressive. But come back to the basic premise of your question. I think you're correct. I think in the old days, contractors and everybody down the contracting line tend to trust the architect. They may not always agree with his decision, but they will respect his decision, the engineer's decision, the architect's decision. But today the problem is that in the old days one would also appreciate that you have very few architects and engineers on the contracting side of the business, right? The situation is quite different today. You probably have more articulate engineers and architects on the side, on the contracting side, than on the consulting side. Especially when it comes to contractual matters. So most of the architects, if you press them very hard today, they will, in Singapore at least, they will rather give up the certifying function. Because that's a function that attracts a lot of criticism and a lot of challenges on grounds of professional misconduct, right? We have a number of cases, for example, where as a professional you are alleged to succumb to improper pressure. This is a term that's used by Duncan Wallace in SIA conditions of contract, right? And sometimes even fraud, right? And it's also, of course, these terms are used in order to resist the enforcement of payment certificates under Order 14 procedures. But look, no professional man like to be tainted even indirectly with these these allegations, right? So it's a pretty ugly kind of situation. I think, and I suppose in some ways the SOP, our Security of Payment Act, does relieve architects and engineers, a little bit of the certifying, responsibility, because they will say that, look, if I get it wrong, it will be corrected by adjudicator. If the contractor really thinks that I am very off the mark so far, off the mark, he will apply for adjudication. And so if the fact that he has not applied for adjudication is usually taken to suggest that he has tacitly more or less tolerated that, that certification, even though he may not have accepted in full. So the SOP Act has been quite salutary, at least, from that angle. But there are other issues, right? The extension of time issues, the problem with defects, and these are issues that feature in a lot of our cases in Singapore. Last year we had again another 15 to 20% increase in the number of volume of adjudication cases, and so the interesting sort of dimension in that, with that development is that adjudicators' determinations are being increasingly challenged. I think the more familiar they are with the process, the more likelihood they are, that a misstep or miscalculation would be challenging. And I had this awful period, last year where I had to sit on, a number of complaints panel on adjudicators.
We have been having an increase of adjudications in the sense that when the Act was actually first announced, we had 30. Then I think last year we had 200. 200 cases. 199 to be exact, so I say 200. But I think it's already started again. So this year, I believe that we will surpass the 200, and then it will be at least 300. I think one of the things is that people are getting just the feel of it. And you're quite right, I think Mr. Chow is quite right in saying that it is now become the way to actually test a certificate. So if you give a certificate that you're unhappy with, then the venue now goes to adjudication, and the adjudicator, when he decides, there is actually also some penalty involved simply because of the costs. Here we are following cost follows event, so you have to pay the cost. So the pressure now increases on the professional. If it's being, I don't think so. They've been questioned yet. But soon the clients will start to question and say, look, why did you do this? Why did I have to pay and defend your certificate? So I think that is going to come soon. But nevertheless, I think it's a good development. It's a good development. We see a lot of interesting things coming in, especially with trying to deal with EOT and LADs and all these things coming in, because we don't allow cross claims. So we are now trying to grapple on how that has to be sorted out. But I suppose then we will leave it to the courts to help us with that. I had one last question. Is it one more question? Okay. And we will stop after this, because we have to.
Good evening, Mr. Chow. I'm Ho. As we know that the Malaysian and Singapore government is going to embark on the high-speed rail project between KL and Singapore. So part of the work, the track will be on Malaysia, and I'm pretty sure that Singapore is going to complete their work ahead of Malaysia and going to wait for the Malaysian team to come across because of the length. So what would be your advice to the Malaysian teams, to deliver this mega project within cost and time, and if possible with the least construction dispute?
If I'm 25 years old, I would have been able to answer the question, but today I can't. I think obviously it's a very, very complex project, right? It's not, you have there's so many different parts, and coming from, even if you appoint a team of consortium of contractors, the different parts are going to be assembled all over the world, right? And of course, the Malaysian side is a larger portion of it, and obviously you guys will be driving most of the, the momentum of the project. I'm not sure whether we have okay, I'm not privy to any of their deliberations on this project, but I'm not sure whether this issue of disputes and the kind of claims that would inevitably arise have actually been properly considered yet. I'm not privy to their deliberations, but I imagine that it would have to be addressed at some point in time, because I don't know whether you have this problem with curtain walling in this country. It's 60% of our construction disputes in Singapore, if it's building contract, will involve some curtain walling subcontractor. But if you look at the way curtain walling systems are assembled, you appreciate why, right? If you have a fairly complex curtain walling system, involving a particular stone system, now your stone probably be quarried in country A, you might even be cut and polished in country B, then your aluminium things will come from, say, country C, the design could be done in country D. You could have as many as 6 or 7 sort of countries with all different parts of or just one element of the project is being carried out. And so just to integrate that curtain walling is usually a fairly trying task. And that's the reason why curtain walling features in a lot of construction disputes. So
I think I'll try to answer it. I think the first problem will be land acquisition. And I think the best example that we have is our double tracking project. Our double tracking project is still going on. It's not complete. I don't know. No, we decided to actually have, we used to have a single track all round. So now they decided to do a double track. And I think, and they split the double track starting from the Indians, went to the Chinese, and then it came back to the Malaysians. But I think one was the land acquisition. The other thing is that basically contractors. The other problem is that we were not able to actually cut people when they fail. There is no level of, one thing I must say in mega projects or whatever it is, there is no punishment if you fail. You're actually paid. You may be paid even more. So, so it depends how you handle it. So I think that is something that is beyond contract. I give you an example. When we built the KLRCA, it was a very fast design build, fast track project, mega project. But I still remember I was involved in one part where there was a settlement with the contractor, and when you read the settlement agreement, it's basically kiss and don't tell. So it's a large sum of money just given away just to sort out the nobody wanted to go through the detail of what is the claim, what is the amount, and all these things. So I think that's the real truth of what sometimes mega projects can do. When price starts to move, as I think Mr. Chow has pointed out, that nobody wants to actually take a responsibility, and everybody wants to keep it down, very quiet. And once you keep it quiet and the public doesn't know about it, it's a very successful project. Nobody asks you how much was the price at the end. But do you remember the Sydney Opera House? Do you remember how much fuss and all these things went on, how much it cost? All now, did you look at it, it's such a nice project. Isn't it? I think that's the moral of a mega project. When you finish it and it's being used, nobody remembers what's the cost. Anyway, can we thank Mr. Chow Kok Fong in the customary way? Thank you very much for coming here. It was a very interesting talk. We have a small gift to offer you.
Once more, can we please put our hands together for Mr. Chow for an excellent presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chow. Thank you, Datuk, for moderating the session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this Friday evening. For upcoming talks, please do drop by our website at www.klrca.org. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Have a great evening. Do stay back for some coffee, tea, and wine. And we hope to see you soon. Have a great weekend. Thank you.